Hey guys, welcome into the House of Halas Podcast, episode number 3. We are here talking. I'm Jack. That's Frank. That's Naz. All three of us today had to join. We had to talk a little bit about the Bears' overall state of things. We will not be discussing the absolute beatdown that was handed to the Bears by the 49ers, 38-13. Bears fall to 4-9 for their 7th straight loss. We will not be talking about that at all, because I mean, you just hear the score. There's not a lot to talk about. We feel like maybe now is the time to go a little bit overarching Bears stuff right now instead of talking about that game. I do want to give a little quick factoid real quick before we get into the main meat of the podcast. Boys, Caleb Williams, his final number, 17 of 23 for 134 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 fumble, which just a stupid fumble, whatever. But he was sacked 7 times, which means that now Caleb has been sacked 56 times, which is the most by a Bears quarterback in a single season, with 4 games still left to go.
That's incredible to think about, because Cutler had some really bad O-lines, and we thought it was just the worst we'd ever see in terms of a unit.
And it probably... Justin probably would have approached that number if it wasn't for his obviously running ability, making that offensive line look a little bit better than apparently it ever was. Nas, 56 times with 4 games left to go. Does that boil your blood a little bit? People say that you're a little too solemn on these podcasts, so I'm trying to get you fired up a little bit here.
Well, I hate to disappoint, but it just makes me worried about the guy.
I think that's the overarching sentiment. Yeah.
I want Caleb to be walking upright in the offseason and getting better, not rehabbing an injury.
He should maybe take a page out of Derrick Rose's playbook. He wants to be walking around for his kid's graduation.
Dude, you just stole my line. I was going to fucking mention that about another player today. God damn it. There's a player on the Bears that is in the Derrick Rose graduation role already.
Making some business decisions, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that. We want to do some grand proclamations about certain individuals on this Bears team. We'll get into that. But first, a little bit of Ryan Poles Day today that we wanted to make sure that we covered. Obviously, with Matt Eberflus gone, the hot seat is even hotter for our good friend Ryan Poles. Adam Johns first reported today on Hogan Johns, I believe it was, that the Bears signed Matt Eberflus to a 5-year deal initially and Ryan Poles to a 4-year deal. Fellas, first of all, thoughts on the 5-year deal for Flus and the 4-year deal for the GM? And then after that, do you feel that an extension is incoming? Do we feel like he's deserved? Should he be extended if he's kept around? I want to get some overall thoughts. Frank, let's start with you.
The 4-year, 5-year thing, I've never heard of anything like that in my life. That's strange. Usually you just line them up. That way, even if you let them go, it's like the dead money. I don't know if they call it dead money, but because it doesn't go against the cap, but like it all just lines up, right? It's supposed to make sense. But of course, this is the Chicago Bears, so nothing ever makes sense. In terms of extending him, obviously that has to be on the table, but whatever decision has to be made, I don't know if I have an opinion one way or the other, because I am sort of turning a leaf in accepting that maybe Ryan Poles isn't as good as we gave him credit for with a lot of these things, and that's kind of why the grand proclamations a little bit later I think is going to be pretty necessary. But Kevin Warren has to make the decision right now, because if you're going to let the guy pick a head coach, you can't just fire him after a year. That's just going to be another whole turnstile, do-si-do, or doing this whole rigmarole again. It can't happen. Either you have faith in the guy to give him another 3-4 year window with a new head coach to see how he builds with him and how things go, or you have no faith at all, even an inkling of a doubt that he's going to get it wrong. You got to get rid of him and get your guy. It just is what it is. Naz, what do you think?
I think he's got to go. We need cohesion. And at least if he is gone, then we can maybe take the approach of hiring the coach first and then bringing in a complimentary GM, because it's pretty clear Kevin Warren has taken the reins of the organization. whatever GM we bring in is not going to be the top guy in any way. He's not going to be a culture setter, and he's not going to be running the team from afar. Kevin Warren has clearly made his presence known. So I would rather there be more continuity and bring in a coach and a GM that are on the same page at the same time. But I want to hire the coach first, kind of like what the Niners did with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. So that's what I think. It is really weird. Like 10 months ago, we weren't feeling this way. We're like, oh, Poles is in his bag, and we're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of concerned this, kind of concerned, but nah, like we got Rome, like let's go. And no, yeah, different vibes these days.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, tell any Bears fan coming off that end of last season that this is where we'd be at a year later. It's just nobody would have believed you. The 5-year, did they like overpay for Flus? Like, did he have like another offer or something? Like it just doesn't make sense. Because normally I feel like the norm is 4 years. I feel like that's kind of the norm. But then we heard, obviously, that Eberflus had that 5th year, and so maybe that's why they leaned even more towards bringing him back this year. But then to find out that Ryan Poles had a year less than him, like what if something had happened? Would Eberflus have been kept, and then they let Ryan Poles? Like that's just, it's so Bears. It's just so Bears. I think that's the best way to phrase it. The other little piece of the other little nugget news for Ryan Poles is Sylvie of Waddle and Sylvie reported that Ryan Poles is reportedly probably from Mr. Bagent again. He's frustrated with having to report to Kevin Warren, and that he actually might not have taken this job if he knew what the dynamic would really be like. He apparently really enjoyed reporting directly to George and ownership. I think that makes a ton of sense. Guy gets hired above him. He now has a new boss who maybe he doesn't see eye to eye with, didn't know what that would be like in the interview process. Thoughts on this report that Ryan Poles, and again, it's not confirmed or anything. We have to be a little tenuous about where the source is coming from with everybody wants Tyson Bagent to be starting. But if this is true, are you shocked? Are you good with Ryan Poles moving on? Like, what is sort of the way forward from here?
I mean, make no mistake, whether this is true or not, like him feeling it, your boy got cucked out. I mean, it is what it is. Like, he's not the football guy anymore. Nas was just talking about that. And every time that more gets unveiled, every time a layer of the onion gets peeled back, what Nas first said after that press conference just remains, it's aging like fine wine. That needs to be put in a museum somewhere, because he called this. He looked at sort of the dynamics. He looked at the way it looked and sort of the adult in the room. Everything he said there is just continuing to come to light. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that he is frustrated with it, but then like, I just keep going back to Nas's point of like, that was probably needed. Whether he stays or not, someone above him was needed for the time being until he matures into this role. And if that means this just wasn't for you and you have to go elsewhere and be a GM some years down the road, and this is sort of on your resume, it is what it is. I mean, that's how I'm feeling right now.
This feels like some PR work done from the Poles camp to maybe save some face, because I don't think this gets.
I was always planning on getting fired. I was never planning on being around forever.
I don't think this gets like leaked in any way, unless you're like trying to make it seem like, oh well, I didn't really want to be here anymore, kind of thing. It's hard to get another run as a GM. You need to have like a lot of success to get a second stint somewhere else. And since Poles hasn't really been here long enough to like establish a good amount of success, this might be like what his agent told him to do, so he could maybe like keep some credibility going his way. I don't know. It's not great.
He is young enough. I know we've talked about that a number of times, especially these last couple of weeks. He is young enough where I do believe if he were to move on, he would definitely get another chance at some point to be a GM. It just doesn't seem like this is something he's going to want to build through, and maybe that relationship with Kevin Warren just isn't as super positive as they made us believe. And again, you just go back, like Frank, you were mentioning, every time a layer gets peeled from this shit ball of an onion, you just start thinking like, okay, now things kind of make a little bit more sense, just with like the weird answers that the weird non-answers, I should say, that Kevin Warren was giving about who had the final say, and the demeanor that Kevin Warren had versus Ryan Poles, who kind of looked just like he would rather be anywhere else, which you could read into it a million different ways, but you kind of start putting those puzzle pieces together to get a bigger picture. Things are not good in Halas Hall right now. And I know we weren't going to touch on the game too much, but you get all this positivity coming out. Oh, the week of practice was so amazing. We did such a great job with the details. Everything looked so good. And then the team just doesn't show up and gets blown out in a primetime game. And so I think it's just really kind of setting in what this culture that was so important to Ryan Poles, it's just not there right now. The 4 big quotes that he had. Our philosophy will be building this team through the trenches. Did he do that, Frank and Nas?
I'm not even close. It was literally the total opposite.
He said, we will focus on building a winning culture. Would you guys, either of you, say that that's there?
They haven't won.
He believes in Matt Eberflus. He's the right coach for the team. Nope.
He was not.
And the final one that is getting run in his face right now, we will take the North and never give it back. By the way, this is their, third straight 4th place finish?
Yes.
Yikes.
Great. Just really, really great. And they got a Monday Night Football game on the road in Minneapolis coming up here. So,
God. Can I just say too, though, but my overarching thought.
That sigh is every Bears fan, Nas.
Yeah. My overarching thought, though, is these were the worries, not necessarily from us. We were just sort of letting things play out. I don't think we ever delved too much into it, but these were the worries from people who were pretty upset at the way that this all shaped out in terms of hiring backwards, getting the coach, the GM, and then the president of football operations or whatever his official title is to be the football guy. It all just happened out of order. Now, the coach and GM, to Naz's point earlier, like you can do that one of two ways. I'm always okay with, however, as long as it winds up working. With the football guy being the last one, he didn't pick any of these fucking guys. He has no ties to any of it. So anything that you have potentially built, even if it's positive, it's probably just for the next guy anyway. Like, so that's what a lot of people's worries were. And unfortunately, it's just all coming to fruition.
Last question I have for the poll stuff, and then we'll get to our grand proclamations. Is there a scenario? I know both of you kind of are kind of said where you're leaning. How comfortable, on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, how comfortable would you feel if Ryan Poles was retained and given an extension and was allowed to supposedly hire his next, his second head coach? Oh, man, that silence is not good. That's not good.
I want to hear what Nas has to say first.
I'm okay with it right now because I know he's not the only one making the decision. Because I actually don't trust him right now.
Yeah.
So if he's retained, I'm not gonna be pissed off about it. If he's part of this decision. Seeing those that preliminary 4 coach target tweet that we discussed offline earlier, that's encouraging if those are really the 4 targets, because I think those are all good candidates. I like this coaching pool. I'd like to say it's dummy proof, but I just said that last offseason. So yeah, I'm feeling fine. I feel fine. I'm numb right now. God damn it.
Those 4 head coaches that Nas was referring to was a tweet by Dan McNeil, which just, please don't be accurate. Like, I don't need Dan McNeil being relevant in 2024 and beyond. The coaches he mentioned, sources confirm that these 4 names are being looked at by the Bears: Ben Johnson, Brian Flores, Joe Brady, and Mike Vrabel. All 4 we have talked about a few times on this podcast. Frank, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I feel where Nas is coming from. I have sort of conflicting thoughts. I still don't think he's done an awful job gathering player talent, but forget the roster itself. Like if sort of what Nas is saying, if Kevin Warren sort of has a different role with the culture and the coach picking and things, and they sort of figured out their avenues that way, I'd probably be a little more comfortable. We'll never know what those roles actually are. So I would choose to believe that that's going to happen to be comfortable with it. But then I just think about, I mean, dude, we've never really even taken a deep dive into all the assistant coaches and like the weird culture shit that's happened. 2 people got dismissed last year and we still really don't know why. All Ryan Poles said was like, yeah, like the behavior was unacceptable. So like, were you hitting on some of the female coaches? Were you like, and we know like NFL, or really like any professional teams coaches can say some pretty wild shit to try to amp their guys up. But like, were you saying something so over the line to some of these guys? Like, we have no idea. So all we can do is speculate. Point being, he has been awful at assembling a coaching staff. Truly, truly awful. So even if he were to hit on a lot of these pieces, and you know, we like the Jalen stuff, Tyreek still has a chance to get things turned around. Like there are players where you can say, you know what, maybe he's drafted well and signed some guys well. Obviously, we know the bad stuff too. But even if he knocked it out of the ballpark on the player side, he just completely cut his feet from under him because of all this coaching stuff. It's been since last year. Alan Williams was dismissed. I forget who the other, I think it was a defensive staff, the DB's coach, I believe. And then obviously this year with the wrong hire with Waldron, like it's just, he's never made a good, and Eberflus in general, but he's never made a good decision on that, on that side of things. So it's tough. I have conflicting thoughts, and I just, I don't know. Like Nas said, I'm numb.
If he, it is tough. Like people saying that he's the worst GM in Bears history. Like, go read a fucking book.
Phil Emery existed, and that wasn't that long. Like, how young are you? That's ridiculous.
Learn some history about the Bears. He's definitely not the worst GM, but he hasn't done anything to really solidify himself in a position that he should be given the keys and just trusted to draft the correct way, find the best players. There's a ton of players he's missed, and again, that happens. But like the offensive line thing, the defensive line thing, he just didn't do enough with it. And, Bears fans and media and everybody was just screaming from the mountaintops, you have to improve this. And he just decided not to. And it's not for lack of trying. He did invest certain resources, just not ideally, I think, the way that most people would expect you to. Speaking of coaching, Frank, I think that's a good little transition into our grand proclamations that we'd like to make. Listen, the rest of the season is going to be really tough to talk about because we're right back to doing what we always do, which is pray to God that we get to the offseason as quickly as possible so we can talk about the draft and we can talk about the coaching hires and we can talk about training camp, and then we get all hyped up for 10 wins, and then we're right back here the year later talking about how, oh my God, how did this team win 5 wins? Frank, we're going to talk a little bit about specific individuals, and I know that you want to start us off here on our new little segment, our Grand Proclamation segment, and you want to talk a little bit about Thomas Brown. It sounds like new interim head coach, off to a really, really great start.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Thomas Brown for my portion of the Grand Proclamations segment, and to dive into it a little bit more, just the segment itself, listeners. This segment it really doesn't matter what happens the rest of the way. Our mind is made up, and this can be positive and or negative. It could be either or. We touched a lot on how we thought things could end with Thomas Brown, and we really all came to the conclusion of like, I don't think there's anything he can do short of winning a Super Bowl this year, which was like really out of the question, of like not even interviewing elsewhere. The best he could do was to be on the list, be on that 5, 6, however many, they initially interview. Not a controversial take by any means. Boys, my grand proclamation is that he cannot be on that list. The bleeding blue liberal cuck inside of me is going to tell you why I have empathy for the man because, we've talked about this. He was just the passing game coordinator fucking 2 days ago. So I get it. He was set up to fail in this scenario. Like he should have been the coach after New England, probably at the beginning of the year. Who the hell knows, right? But given, all those excuses to the side, which they're very legitimate excuses, to come off of a longer week, what do they call it? Like that, a mini bye week, and to look that unprepared on both sides of the ball. I mean, we talked about how, he instilled the confidence in Caleb, which he did when he moved up to play calling, and the guys are loving it, and the details and the this and the that, and we were amped for it. But we talked about this, Jack, a few weeks ago. I forgot what game. Was it the Washington game? I forget what game it was. Whatever it was. It happened a few times this year where expectations rose again and this team falls flat on its face. And it's been happening since the end of Lovie Smith. It's been, it just always happens. The second that the fan base gets riled up, the second that they start to look better than a middling team and expectations rise, they always fall flat. And that's what happened. And the funny part about it all is the expectations rising wasn't like, yeah, like we're going to go in and beat the hell out of the Niners. I think maybe some of us felt that way, but it was more like, hey, we can be watchable. We're going to be in these games. Thomas Brown's going to show us what a run-of-the-mill, at the very least, coach can do for this team. And that didn't happen. Your boy was calling plays on the sidelines, and all of a sudden, numerous times throughout a game, he has 4 or 5, maybe not that many, 3 guys on the same portion of the field running the same route. And it's like, did Shane Waldron just come back and start calling this thing? Is this Matt Nagy all over again? 5-yard curl routes, every single. I mean, it's like, again, you can't be too hard on the guy because he's just been promoted twice in 2 weeks. So I get it, but I'm out on him being on the short list, being a head coach for this team moving forward. I wish him the best of luck, but there's no shot. Fellas, agree, disagree, any sort of pushback? Do you want to add on to it? How are you feeling about my grand proclamation?
Naz, you could feel free to go first if you'd like. You're muted, I think.
I feel bad for the dude. I'm going to be honest. Like, he had 10 days and we thought there was going to be a culture shift and we were going to be a better team for this guy. Again, jumping essentially 2 positions in a month. We don't even know if he was ready to be an OC. And then he got bumped up to head coach. Honestly, if the priority really was Caleb, he should not have been named the head coach. If they wanted to if the true mission of this year was to keep the momentum with Caleb going, which is what it should have been at this point in the season, he should not have been named the head coach because he was clearly overwhelmed this week. And he had a masterclass displayed in front of him on how it should be done. And it's not really his fault. It's just he was not ready for this moment. And that's okay. I would guess a lot of 38-year-old coaches would probably feel this way. We get enamored with the other McVays, O'Connells of the world, and we're like, oh yeah, this is our version of that. It's like, sorry, it's not. Like, the guy needs more time. And
no, of course it's not. It's the Bears. Why would he?
Yeah. So
why would he step right in and
maybe 50? One day he will be a great head coach. It just won't be here. And I'm not even sure I want him as the OC.
Yeah, I mean,
to be honest, because like the Caleb was back to playing scared again yesterday until it was like absolute go time. But who even really knows? Like, the Niners had put that out of reach so early in the third that it was like, who even cares at this point?
The third, you gave that game a chance until the third.
He meant the third minute.
I gave until the fumble. Because they were driving again. They were driving again. It was gonna be a 2-score game if they drive down, no matter what they would have done. And that it was such a fluky play, and then to just see the defense fold after that was pretty fucking crazy. And then Jonathan Vilma and Kenny Albert didn't help me.
They're primetime guys somehow. Wild. No, Frank, I think you're on the money. Naz, you're absolutely. Look, we talked about it leading up to the game where I said that first half, the slow first half can't happen again, and it happened exactly the same way. And it's only we have been talking about slow starts on this podcast this entire season being an issue, and it's only gotten worse somehow. You've gone from bad first quarters to bad first halves. Like, that's unacceptable. I don't care that, you could feel bad for him, and I do. He's been put in a very difficult situation, but I can't hear all of the positivity from Sean McVay hyping him up to Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles hyping him up and the players talking about, oh my God, what a breath of fresh air. Like, if anything, it's not even a knock for me against Thomas Brown. It's a knock even more against these players and how much I just do not like this team. Like, this is a very unlikable team for me at this time because you got everything you asked for. Jalen Johnson blew the fuck up in the locker room, got his coach fired, and then everybody talks about, oh my gosh, if he's finally gone, the big bad boogeyman is finally gone. And then they go out and do that against a team with, look, the 49ers are still a good team. Let's not get it twisted, but they were missing a lot of guys. Their best running back, not in. Their best tackle, not in. Their best edge rusher, not in. And they still get blown out by halftime. Like that, it's not a knock against Thomas Brown. He can only do so much, but man, this team sucks. I hate this team.
Agreed. No, I mean, I guess to put a crown on it, or a cherry on top here before we move on to the next grand proclamation. The one thing that I guess I'm particularly harsh on him was his value add was going to be the offensive side. I didn't expect the defense to be that bad necessarily, but I knew he wouldn't have that big of an impact. It just I felt it was too late in the year for it, and that was gone immediately when he couldn't call plays from the booth. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or what, but if you're going to be head coach one day still calling plays, you're not going to be in the booth, brother. Like, you got to get down here and do your thing, and he just couldn't handle it. So, yeah, I'm out on the guy. Who are we going with next? Because we got some good names on the list.
Mine will be very quick because I'm not going to go into stats and details like you did, Frank. I'm not here for that. DJ Moore is the worst captain the Bears have ever had in the history of this organization. This dude, send him to Pittsburgh or wherever Justin Fields ends up in the offseason. If it's Minnesota, fucking send him there. We'll take Jordan Addison and whatever, like legitimately, I cannot stand this guy. He has, all he does is talk. Like the back-to-back weeks where he just comes up short with just terrible drops in crucial situations. And all he's done is complain about the quarterback and how much, whatever. Like, and the thing that he does that bothers me the most is he hides behind smiles and everything's a joke and there's no deeper meaning to stuff, even though there very clearly is. He gets paid and immediately he just starts talking. I didn't even know what this guy's voice sounded like for the last 2 years or year, whatever. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden they trade Justin Fields. They get rid of his favorite quarterback because he's not a one-read guy anymore. Caleb's trying to spread the ball around, throws 2 touchdowns to Rome, whatever. And this dude, what does he do? He talks after the game and talks about how, we just start slow. We're just the offense. It's got to be better. Defense, yeah, I feel like they got a little bit. And not once does he, as a captain, say, no, I fucked up. I had a huge drop. It set the tone. I need to be better. He doesn't lead. He talks. And it makes me sick. Like, I was so hyped for this dude to get traded to the Bears, and now I legitimately cannot wait till he's gone. And that sucks because he's a good player, but he's not a wide receiver one, but he wants to be paid like one. He wants to talk like one, but he isn't one. And he's not a leader of this team. Can't stand him.
I don't disagree with anything that you said. Naz, I'll toss it to you. I have a really, it is funny because I had no pushback, nothing to add. It's funny though that you said that he's the worst captain. Granted, this is a little bit different, but we did have a fella named Jay Ratliff who had to get escorted from Halas Hall.
He's worse.
And then he was named captain the very next week. So are we saying DJ's worse than him?
Yes. Because I'm hyped up right now. Listen, maybe I could be talked
I know.
in a couple weeks from now.
I didn't want to dampen the fire, but that was the first thing that I thought of. I was like, let me think if I can think of a worse captain.
Let me fucking fact check this guy real quick.
He was,
right?
but that was the weird Trestman rotating captains. DJ's been the captain.
There's 8
for the last
captains on this team.
Say that again?
There's 8 captains.
Yeah, that's a lot. We need 4.
For a team that has 4 wins.
I'm not a big fan of players having like huge voices in the locker room. I generally think it's pretty toxic. And for a guy who's on that Derrick Rose trying to get to my kid's graduation plan, my boy DJ Moore over here is displaying maybe the worst leadership I've ever seen from a skilled guy.
I love when me and Nas are on the same page.
fucking seen. You know, it's like all we've heard about is all the conversations that the players are having, the player meetings, talking to Waldron. And it's like, DJ, how many in any of these conversations where you're like, I need the ball in the middle of the field? Did that ever come up? Because I have not seen him get the ball in the middle of the field more than like 4 times all fucking season. God damn it. I hate this dude too. But he is good. And he can redeem himself.
That's okay. Hold on.
This is not like he's so far gone that like I'll never be good with him again. But he is displaying some of the worst leadership I've ever seen. I will agree with that.
Frank, I know you were laughing, and on the inside I was as well. But what Oz just said, it is true, and that's what makes it even more frustrating, honestly, because it's not like he got paid and then he just stopped playing. Like he's still putting up respectable numbers. Like he's going to have another solid season at the end of the day. It is what it is, but it goes beyond the numbers. Like it's just it truly feels like he needed Justin to stay to like care about this team. And like I know people are going to point to the contract. Well, then why did he sign a contract? Because it's a contract extension. It's money. Like it's a huge contract. You're going to get paid. Of course he's going to take it. Who wouldn't? And I think he gave Caleb Williams a chance, and it just hasn't gelled the way we were hoping it would. And he's just, I just don't think he's a leader.
I don't either.
Now, he can turn it around, but I don't like what I'm seeing.
And something Nas said, I agree with, and I'll even say like it's magnified because he's a receiver. I don't like too big of voices in the locker room either. There has to be coaches that, I mean, like, do you think anyone in Mike Tomlin's on his team is fucking commanding a room outside of like a quick speech, you know, fire, rah, rah, blah, 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 but like real leadership role? I think that's highly doubtful. But even using them as an example, look at what he's done with these psycho-ass receivers since we've known Mike Tomlin. What DJ Moore is doing this year is just a reflection of how bad this culture has been. Because not only, like, we've never heard DJ really talk that much. And now that we are, it's not anything positive or glowing. It's showing us, like, he feels comfortable. Nas, you said this a few weeks ago. You're like, why the fuck is he comfortable just walking off the field like that? It's a precedent that's been set, and it is what it is. And he's just being allowed to be this poor leader. So I think that's the ultimate reflection of what has been built over the last 3 years under Ryan Poles' tenure.
Can I clarify something from our listeners?
Yes.
I don't think any of us feel like the players can't be extremely vocal. I think the one nuance or thing that we would want to add to that is we want them to take the attitude or take the culture, but the lead has to be taken by the head coach.
Yes.
You know, like it's the coach who's setting the tone, and then the players are kind of like enforcing that. It can't be them just making up their own culture and like being in a separate part or, you know, separated from what the coaches are trying to accomplish. So as long as the coach is taking the lead, I'm all for the players being vocal just in this situation. And I think we all agree in this situation, it's like they're just saying whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
Well, and that's I think you're right on the money. I think that's a huge reflection of having 8 captains, because it empowers that specific group of captains to talk amongst themselves. And basically 8 is a lot. Like that's a nice group of guys getting together and just getting their feelings out and then feeling validated because there's enough people around them saying, oh yeah, you're right. This is messed up what Eberflus is doing and blah, blah, blah. Like it's just not a good look. And for Ryan Poles to talk about how important culture is, he's sure done a really bad job of building a good one. Because I mean, now you go back and look at like the silly stuff that happened with Jalen Carter, and you know you could talk about the decision to trade back. They were never going to draft him, blah blah blah, whatever. But a big part of that was because of the culture that they wanted to protect by not drafting a guy with that type of background, Jalen Carter. But now it's like, well, that didn't matter. And now you just passed up on arguably one of the best defensive linemen in the league right now.
That also, and we want to, for transparency for the listeners, I don't want to harp too much because we're trying to shorten these goddamn episodes. We don't stop yapping. But isn't that kind of like, there are times you have to look yourself in the mirror and realize you're sort of like telling yourself something about that, or there's a grand proclamation, if you will. If you didn't trust your head coach to handle Jalen Carter, doesn't that tell you a little something about your head coach? Right? Now, if you wanted to prioritize offensive line, by all means, that's okay. But the only reason that they did not pick this guy, who by all accounts is perfect for this cover 2 defense, the Tommy Harris of the defense, is because of his attitude and background and everything. That's telling to me, because I don't think Bill B drafted a fucking gangbanger. Like, what are we talking about? Like,
there's a whole Netflix series.
Fucking George Pickens goes to, and he throws a little tantrum, and Mike Tomlin's like, look at me, buddy. What did he say to him on the thing? It was great. He said, look at me. This ain't gonna win or lose the game. Get your head in the fucking game. Get in there, buddy. Just slaps him on the ass, and George Pickens makes a play. Like,
look at the receivers he's dealing with. And
supremely talented players have always had a very long leash. It has been happening since Parcells and Lawrence Taylor, since Jimmy Johnson and Michael Irvin. Like, you just go down the line. There is always, and I forgot who said it. It might have been Jimmy Johnson, but it was a player who like came into him in the locker room and was like, we're not getting treated the same way in this locker room. And he goes, well, can you do what that guy can do? And if you can't, then yeah, you're damn right, I'm going to treat you different. And the Bears just, all right, I don't want to go down this hole. We got to keep moving.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jack, you mentioned defensive linemen, and we just talked about one, Jalen Carter. That brings us to our next grand proclamation, which is the further away we get from this Montez Sweat trade and extension, the more we're going to hate it. And I hate to take victory laps. I really do. Which is, I'm lying. I actually love that I'm doing this right now.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like Nas at all.
I didn't love the trade. I thought we could have gotten him on the market or gotten someone comparable on the market. I didn't like giving a second rounder. And then the extension happened. I was like, okay, he's a top 10 defensive paid player. Okay. And then he had that great second half. But you know what? It just got me to thinking. I was like, well, what if that was just how second halves, when you're out of the playoff contention, like maybe that's just what it looks like. Everyone's playing free. They're paying to look good. They're inflating numbers. They don't need to worry as much about winning. And maybe let's see how it goes when it really matters. So I'm just going to throw some Montez Sweat numbers at you real quick. Okay. He's got 11 solo tackles all year.
Jesus.
Okay. He's got 1 forced fumble. He's 30th in pressures. He's 17th in hurries. He's 40th in sacks. He's got 2 batted balls all year. And he's played 12 games, by the way. And he's 9th in defensive payroll in the entire league this year.
Wait, amongst all defensive players or defensive linemen?
Here's the list of the 20 highest paid defensive players by average on annual salary.
Shit.
I got linebackers, D tackles, D ends, and then the cornerbacks eventually come in. But yeah. So yeah, he's in the mid-20s. It's bad. It's bad. Myles Garrett is making $500K more than him this year.
Wonderful.
Okay? And I have no problem paying a great player. Like you need those Chris Joneses of the world. You pay them. Absolutely. But when you overpay for good, it is going to cost your team. And this team does not lack. It lacks depth in very important areas. And this was supposed to shore up some of that lack of depth. And the situation hasn't been great for them. We have not played with a lot of leads. And that's where you really get to juice up a lot of those numbers. You get in very advantageous situations where he could really be effective. But that's not what I want. I need the 9th highest paid player on defense to be doing.
Max Crosby's doing it in Vegas, and what help does he have?
Yeah.
Like, that's a difference maker. You know what I mean? Like, I'm fully on board with you now. Like, this, it's so easy to overlook what he's, just because of how invisible he is. I feel like nobody really talks about him at all. You know, a lot of excuses are made. There's no secondary edge rusher. There's, like you said, they're not in a lot of good situations. They're always usually playing from behind, which means teams are usually running the ball more. Obviously, the run defense hasn't been great. Can't really get a lot of those numbers. But we just watched him miss an easy sack in the game against the 49ers. He didn't finish, and that's sort of been the story of this season for like he hasn't finished a lot of these plays.
I mean, there's plays you don't even notice him on the field.
Yeah.
It's like you would never watch the Steelers and not know where TJ Watt was.
Right.
It would just never I mean, besides the fact that he's like one of the rare white dudes on the field, but like still.
They have two whiteys, don't they? They have Highsmith across from him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Couple whites. They can be proud.
But yeah, like you always know where that guy is, and
that's what we need. We need a white edge rusher. We need one of those. Those are like the tops.
Can I interest you
right?
in Shea McClellan?
He wasn't an edge rusher. He was nothing. He was
that's what they wanted him to be. And my God, seeing Leonard Floyd have a highlight play. I mean, come on.
I was a little upset that we don't want to go down rabbit holes. I was a little upset that we let him go.
Leonard Floyd. Don't bring up Leonard Floyd. Let's not talk about Leonard Floyd.
I did too. He was opposite of Khalil Mack. He was never going to be the number one guy. Anyway, no, listen, Nas, you have a lot of the stats to back it up, and even like trying to toss him a little bit of a bone to say that, you know, we're not playing with very many leads. That's true. But the one thing that I don't want to neglect in all this is that was one of the bigger points of taking him over Chase Young at the time with the trade was because he was better in the run, was because he had an impact on the run. And that has not happened at all. I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm generally not a stats guy. I see it with my gut. I could fucking feel it. And like just what you guys are talking about, what like has popped out? Because I even think about people would try to say like Julius Peppers was overrated because he sometimes would struggle to get double-digit sacks. But it's like, just watch him play football.
Right.
Watch him get off that edge. Watch him stuff the one. I don't give a fuck.
Off the screen.
That's what I mean.
It was incredible. He was a superhuman.
Exactly. And they do the same thing now with Myles Garrett. Oh my God, he's not getting the 20 sacks that Trey Hendrickson is. Watch Myles Garrett play football. Just watch him play. I don't care what the numbers say. Like, that becomes anecdotal to a certain degree. Leads come into play. If a quarterback knows the pressure's coming and he gets rid of it, sacks can be a little bit luck-based, but you getting there and beating your guy off the line never is. And Sweat just has not done that consistently this year. I will say, not to throw him a bone, but it is a little fucking strange. I know Eberflus wasn't there last week, but this isn't the only pass rusher that feels almost neutered. And I thought about this, Nas, because you talked about like, maybe we should have saw this coming because last year, you know, season's over when we trade for him. It was more for a future, you know, for the future anyway. So understandable, but he was playing a little more free and all that. And I agree with that. But then I think about, so you finally get an off-season work with this team. And it was the same thing with, we're seeing Al-Qadim Mohammed make plays. Not that he's a superstar by any means, but who was the fellow that we signed to the one-year deal last year that all of a sudden just couldn't rush the quarter? Yannick Ngakoue. All of a sudden, these guys get into the system and they just can't sack the quarterback anymore. And again, I'm not throwing him any excuses. I'm just saying it is a little bit funny that seems to happen in this system. And I just can't seem to figure out what the hell the issue is.
I'm taking a look right now. Is there any concern? Obviously, we will have at the very least, we will have a new defensive coordinator starting next year, whether that's the head coach, whether that's just coordinator. Is there any concern about the potential to switch to a 3-4 and have him standing up? Like, because you're paying, like you said, Nas, you're paying him to be one of the best defensive players in football.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't mind him being him on the line in a 3-4. I think he can handle it. The way he plays the run, I think with the better approach to the rush game, and the way he plays the run, if we had better game planning, I think he'll be just fine in that system. I am not concerned about switching to 3-4. I don't think he needs to be. I think Booker is probably the biggest candidate that is going to go to outside linebacker. And I think that suits him okay. He's already light as fuck anyways. This way, we don't have to put him on any type of weight plan. He can play the way he is right now.
Leonard Floyd 2.0.
I don't know. I like Sweat as a 3-4 D end, to be honest.
I don't hate that.
In that JJ Watt mold. Like JJ Watt got 20 sacks playing a D end
Yep.
Like you can get pressure if you just go be elite, go be the monster you are.
And I'll just add to that, not even thinking of Sweat in particular. That switch isn't as daunting in today's NFL with how much nickel that you have to play because it's such a passing league now. So to Naz's point, kicking him in a little bit inside could be very helpful. That would make that glaring need at edge even more glaring because it's here now when he's here. So I mean, you're talking about a potential, first round pick as an edge if that were to happen.
I don't know if we get someone like Flores who can just dial it up, who can dial it up and mix it and like do that sort of stuff. Like I don't give a shit about the defense. Let's be real, guys. We do not fucking care. I'm ready to score 30 a game and give up 27. I do not give a shit. I want a quarterback. If we draft a DN in the first round, I'm out. Don't expect me to show up to games. Don't expect me to show up to podcasts. If we draft a DN in the first round, I'm out. Straight up.
Wait, okay, not to dive too deep though, but what if they invest heavy money into the offensive line via free agency and then they say, we'll shore up the other trench via the draft?
I don't know, man.
Listen, we're gonna draft G.
I don't
we're
like
gonna
it.
draft Ashton
G&T. Carolina
from...
just did that. They're still dog shit.
Yeah,
like, it's not like and also like you want to talk about building culture. You got to invest in this interior, man, because then their toughness is going to be what rubs off on the team. Our physicality is going to be dictated by how we knock people off the line. I'm
agreed.
Just, can we let's get some youth in here? Jesus Christ!
And just
Montez Sweat, he is the embodiment of just like this Ryan Poles era. I feel like where it's just like we have a lot of good to very good players, but no great players. But we have guys masquerading as great players, or who get talked about like they're great players. That's the biggest issue. Now, obviously, the positive is that the quarterback and his rookie wide receiver look to be on that track to be great players. The problem is you look around at the entire rest of the roster and there's not a lot of guys with super high ceilings. Like even like Gervon Dexter, who I think we can all agree has played pretty well in his second season, has taken a nice jump that we all were kind of told he would, which is exciting. I kind of feel like he's playing at maybe close to his ceiling. Like this is just what he's going to do kind of year in, year out. I don't really see another step that he's going to take. Now, hopefully I'm wrong. But outside of that, like you look around and where else do you see guys with that star? I'm not even saying superstar, just star level blue chip prospect ceiling. Like how many guys are on the roster right now?
None. I mean, what you just described Gervon Dexter to be, I think of like Darnell Wright. I don't know if I'll ever be that superstar that we could have potentially gotten with the first round pick at right tackle. It's beyond serviceable, but yeah, that was the first one that came to my mind being young. And outside of the two, obviously Caleb in Rome.
It's a small number. It's a small number. And like, you can't always rely on it to be like a first or second round pick. Like, you gotta hit those late. You gotta hit one of these late guys, man. They gotta be contributors.
Puka Nacua would have been nice instead of Tyler Scott.
Torrey Taylor's on my list too. He's really good.
I mean, like Gronk is a third round pick.
Yep.
George Kittle's a third round pick.
No, fifth. Kittle was a fifth.
Kittle was a fifth. My bad. Oh my god! And seeing that in the game, like Jonathan Vilma complimenting George Kittle for chipping and acting like he was in pass pro and then leaking out and getting open. Like I was like, that's like literally the easiest thing he could be doing right now. That is
listen
literally
to like Lance Briggs talk about the George Kittle stuff, and just hearing it from an all pro player like that talk about, he's just like confused about how nobody is on George Kittle. Like it's just that, because it's one thing for the three of us to say that, to be like, oh my God, how is George Kittle wide? But like to hear Lance Briggs of all people being like, no, like legitimately, how is he that wide open? That pisses me off. That pisses me off a ton. I don't like being right.
I know.
To Naz's point, I don't like being right. I want to be proven wrong. I want to look like an idiot fanboy who doesn't know what he's talking about, just a giant meatball. But this team just can't get out of its own way. It just can't. And we're stuck in this cycle because we have. Okay, I do want to loop this podcast back around just 1 second here, and then this is kind of where we'll leave this, because the only argument that I would make for keeping Ryan Poles is simply for consistency and continuity. And I know we've talked about that a ton, and it's not the exact best reason to keep him. I don't think he's done necessarily like we've talked about it. He hasn't done the worst job. It's not like we're begging for him to be shown the door. Like it has to happen or this team has no future. He definitely needs to improve as a GM. But we can't just keep showing GMs out the door, shoving them out the door and when they miss on draft classes, because you're just setting up the next GM for failure. Like think about how many misses Jerry Angelo had, which led to Phil Emery making mistakes, which led to Ryan Pace making mistakes, which now has led to Ryan Poles like the margin for error on draft picks is already so high, or so low, I should say, where it's now like Ryan Poles can't make a mistake on draft picks, and that's just not realistic. Well, guys miss all the time.
I get what you're saying, though, Jack, but it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's not always just missing. Get coaches that can actually develop these guys. They don't all have to be stars, but get them to be fucking serviceable. It can't be you're just, going off of raw talent because that's who you are. I mean, I'm thinking of Caleb Williams right now. I need someone to cater to that. I need someone to mold that. I need someone to help, go beyond what he can already physically do. Everything Caleb Williams has done this year has been like, yep, I knew Caleb would do that. I knew that. I want to be in a position, and I don't want to isolate Caleb here, but I think it's the easiest example because you can do this with any position. I want to be in the position where it's like, well, is it really Caleb being good, or is it the fucking OC that's just drawing up play? I want Ben Johnson and Jared Goff situation. I don't give a fuck what people think about Caleb. I want him tossing for 4,500 yards, 30 plus touchdowns, hopefully 0 picks, but only a couple picks and limiting turnovers. And national media can debate all the fuck they want, but we need coaches that do that. Again, that's the extreme example. But just think about like fucking Juwan Jennings was a 7th round pick. He's their wide receiver 1 with their wide receiver. Who's the one that got hurt?
Oh, Ayuk.
With Ayuk out, and he plugs in right away. That's coaching. That's development. We need that.
I mean, you think about the Niners being so solid at skill, they still drafted a receiver early.
Yeah, Ricky.
Because they just know you just don't know what's going to happen. You just can never have enough. When there's a guy that like is separated himself from like the pack, like Pearsall wasn't a need, but they took him anyways because they saw a separator there. I think what you guys are laying out is exactly why Vrabel needs to be this coach.
I'm in.
Because that guy is going to bring in his guys. It's not going to be like this ragtag group of dudes. There is going to be alignment in the way that we play as a team. If that can happen, that actually takes off some stress off of Poles because then he can be less responsible about that. Positives of Poles. He has managed the cap very well.
Yes.
He has put every single year we have been in a very financially flexible position. He has drafted some good players. And we cannot forget that he acquired Caleb. Like, these are all points. These are all positives for him. And those are also part of the job. Like, it's not just picking players. It's not just making trades. He's getting a bad rap right now because the team is floundering and looking miserable. But, like, we cannot overlook the good things he's done. And there have been some good picks. Like, it's just, I just wish he approached it. I don't know. I want to know why his philosophy was starting with drafting through the back end and not the interior. It's just truly like, or in that, maybe not. And like we're going to have 80 mil again this offseason. It's like
the back end
why couldn't we get Christian Wilkins?
Spots.
Like, why couldn't we just beef up and get Christian Wilkins?
And my only
it doesn't make any sense.
I agree with you, Naz, and this is probably a good spot to end, Jack, if you have any thoughts. I agree with you. I think that to me is what makes this offseason so important, is because when he came in here, he was able to draft BPA and sign BPA because everything was a need. There was no, so you can say, well, he drafted the corners and the safeties first because that was just best player on. Okay, cool. I didn't necessarily agree, but just, for the sake of it, fine. This offseason, you have to ditch that philosophy, man. You have to invest in what your weakness is. And if that means overpaying for an offensive lineman who maybe is only, good and not great, but you're paying him like he's great, it is what it is. This is the offseason to stop with the BPA shit. You can't do that anymore. You've got BPA and you have decent players at positions. Now it's time to invest in places that don't have anything. And that's the trenches.
It's also making sure that, and self-explanatory, but making sure you're signing and drafting the correct players because, he did invest in the offensive line. He just didn't do it in a very smart way. Like,
that was like bargain bin shit, dude. That was.
Nate Davis wasn't, though, and he ran to fucking sign him. He ran to sign Nate Davis after all the stuff that came out of Tennessee. Like, that's crazy. And then again, this pursuit, this mythological pursuit of Ryan Bates. Like, I'm genuinely concerned that he has all the cap space and he has, I think it's 3 picks in the top 55. Like, that's great. Can he make the right selections? Like, that's my biggest concern because when it's come to the offensive line, he has not done a whole lot of good. There's one player.
He's
Braxton Jones.
He's acting like an NBA GM. He's acting like an NBA GM. The free agent market it's not like the NBA. You can't just acquire these players. Good players stay with their teams.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a reason that, again, it's the old adage. There's a reason that they're on the market. There's a reason that teams are letting these guys walk.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And when it comes to the Steelers, there's a reason that their wide receivers are available for trade. So stop doing it, NFL teams. You stupid idiots. Jesus Christ.
Just an FYI, Tremaine Edmonds can be cut after next season. I don't know if anybody wanted to talk about that.
Let's he's gonna. If we had time, he was gonna be. He's probably gonna be a grand proclamation from one of us next week.
There's not much to say. He's bad. He's just not good.
Again, that position is so dependent on what's happening in front of them in a 4-3 that when they're getting knocked off the line by 2 or 3 yards, it is hard to play the position. And Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards are making all the fucking tackles. So I don't really understand how that could be a thing. TJ Edwards, we didn't even get him to be a run stopping linebacker. And he's the guy that's flying everywhere.
Your 2 best players are your outside linebacker and your corner and your nickel corner.
No, Jalen, come on.
Come on.
He sucks. He's a fucking bum too. And he needs to shut the hell up too. Stop fucking talking.
Brisker needs to stop tweeting too.
When you pay guys, man, you better have strong leadership when you pay guys.
Oh, they got Mercedes Lewis still. He's going to be my brand proclamation at the end of the season.
Dude, leave him alone. He's fucking 2 years away from AARP.
I won't leave him alone, and yet he's still younger than Velus Jones somehow. That's crazy.
True.
That's crazy.
That is true. All right, Jackie.
This has been the House of Halas podcast. We genuinely appreciate you all listening to this, just sticking with us through this rough season, venting with us. Appreciate all the comments and likes and support that we've gotten. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube if you want to look at our dumb faces while we try to talk through this, looking like idiots, but also smart because everything we've said basically has come true this season except for like wins and stuff. We're going to watch this Monday Night Football game against the Vikings. So our podcast will be delayed a little bit. It'll be delayed by a day. Or who knows? Maybe we do a live watch along. Well, TBD on that. That could be fun. That could be actually pretty fun. Maybe we'll talk about. Look at that. Gears turning as we're doing this stupid nonsense. Nas, Frank, thank you both for your thoughts. I'm Jack. This has been the House of Halas podcast. We will talk to you after a Bears loss to the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football.
Later, Jackie. Later, Nas.